There are two or more concurrent timelines that we're living in. Two separate existences.
Welcome, everyone. We've talked about Dan Burisch on a couple of episodes, and I wanted to give an update. There's some information going around on X, someone claiming they got some new documentation, basically, that verifies the Dan Burisch story. This is something that I've been interested in since I started covering this field, and I know that there's a lot of other folks that have made videos and that have a lot of interest in Dan Burisch as well. I'm going to try to sum it up for you in a quick and easy way here. Dan Burisch first came out in '94 in an interview and said that he was a microbiologist that was recruited since a young age to join the secretive group at Area 51, and he references Groom Lake as well. He's a microbiologist. They brought him on because apparently one of the beings that they recovered from the crash of 47 was a future human. And we're talking a future human from 45,000 years into the future. He refers to them as P45s. Once you start tinkering with time travel, things get weird. So these P45s, they're not alien. Part of the human race became very spiritual and kind of took to the skies, if you will, to space. Another part of the human race, the human species, broke off and went underground. And we're hearing a lot about underground bases right now, where they actually evolved into what looks like our current grays. We get shorter, our heads get bigger, our eyes and cranium change because we're not getting as much light and UV rays. We actually end up becoming the grays. Then once we figure out time travel, trying to come back and alter history, that's where it gets really weird, because some of these grays go way back and decide they're going to use their technology and act like gods. This gets into all the craziness when you talk about ancient civilizations, technologies back then. So the theory is that would explain a lot of what some folks think are the advanced technologies that the human race had before one or two extinction level events. Dan Burisch is mostly working on helping the JRod feel better. He's working on keeping this future human alive because his body is essentially decaying while being held pretty much as a quasi prisoner as part of a negotiation with these future humans. Dan Burisch, kind of what a lot of these whistleblowers do is they say they're not in it for the money, but then that's all they do is kind of cash in on it. Dan Burisch didn't. Dan Burisch made public what he could without breaking any rules. It's rumored Dan Burisch has handlers that are with him 24/7. They even live in with him. I believe it was even rumored his wife was a handler at one point until 2004, where he was allowed to speak about everything. Not only can these future humans travel back and forth between time, but they have this technology called looking glass where you can see into the future. And what you see when you look into the looking glass also changes on your perception of the world, which is really kind of a trip. Dan Burisch claims that during one of these meetings with this international cabal, essentially, that works with these future humans, that he showed them a disaster that would take place in 2012. And that is what garnered the agreement and essentially prevented the end of the world in 2012. It's all a very fascinating story. As I alluded to, Dan Burisch doesn't seem to really be trying to cash in on this. There's not really any Dan Burisch books. There's some Dan Burisch videos and some Dan Burisch interviews we're about to play here in a moment. The one website you're able to track to Dan Burisch that he actually owns is this website here called eaglesdisobey.net. And we'll take a look at this here. What's really funny about this site is that it does change from time to time. but you see there's really not a lot on here. So he's got a Canadian flag up. He's got this little logo here. Sometimes some of these things will be clickable and open up something else. We've got a quote here from Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Stupidity is a more dangerous enemy of the good than malice. One may protest against evil. It can be exposed and, if need be, prevented by use of force. Evil always carries within itself the germ of its own subversion, and that it leaves behind in human beings at least a sense of unease. Against stupidity, we are defenseless. For that reason, greater caution is called for when dealing with a stupid person than with a malicious one. Never again will we try to persuade the stupid person with reasons, for it is senseless and dangerous. Pretty interesting. I'm not sure what this is. This is actually new. Chicken song. Let's see. Oh boy. Check. Okay, so you get it. Now, if we zoom in down here, this, I believe, Lady Marcia Ann is his wife. The other crazy thing about Burisch is that he had a presentation about plasma at the University of California that really stunned a lot of people in attendance. You can still find that on YouTube, where he was able to produce plasma or a plasma reaction by using acoustic waves as stimulus. It's really cool to watch. I mean, I know literally nothing about microbiology, but actually seeing the small plasma fields he was able to generate with this technology, with these acoustics, it was really fascinating. Now, in this video, what we have is Dan Burisch interviews from 1994, and we have Dr. Michael Masters, who has come out and kind of scientifically confirmed how the Dan Burisch story could be true. I hope one day to have Dr. Michael Masters on. Dr. Masters, if you're listening, I would love to interview you about your philosophy on this whole thing. Check out this video, and then you tell me what you think down in the comments.
Dan Burisch, who claims to have worked with the JRod, taking biological samples and stuff. And, you know, his story is compelling. I'm on the fence, but there's a lot of details in it that seem to indicate that what he's saying is accurate.
In order to make interstellar travel feasible, we might also have to invent or figure out backward time travel so that we don't just get home to our planet, we also get home to our own time. So going a little bit further with this time aspect, it's also very possible that we do become extraterrestrial.
As I said to you before, I have never met an alien, but I have met an extraterrestrial.
If we can exclude the extraterrestrial hypothesis strictly as a model that says there is a separate evolution on a separate planet, it's almost a 0% probability that we would have the same evolutionary trajectory that's so rare here on this planet. If we're talking about beings coming from other planets, we wouldn't expect them to be bipedal. They'd be built more like tanks with 6 to 8 legs.
3.5 feet, large head in comparison to torso. So the ratio of the cranial to the torso area would be larger than in what we would call a modern human being. Large, bulbous black eyes. The whites of the eyes had been selected out. So it looked like large people. Initially, I was briefed that JRod was an alien. I had no idea the truth. Yes, from 2 Reticulum 4 now, but I had no idea the truth of how they came to be.
If we interject time into this, it becomes possible to understand how you could have the jinn, how you could have the gypsies, the fairies, the crypto-terrestrials, and all of the different ways that these beings, who may be the exact same beings coming back from the same times, who visit different periods, are perceived differently based on the technology and the understanding of people.
The JRods, to solve their paraprotein problem, used these ERBs to go back in time. And some of them were worshipped. They were treated as gods.
It's fascinating to see how Dr. Michael Masters' expertise in how the human cranium will develop over time. In particular, he specializes in the ocular cavities, to how what he's saying and what he's predicting as far as being able to traverse the epic size of space would require some type of time travel, so that when you leave on your mission and you come back, your wife isn't dead. You want to come home to the same time, and so that's going to require some level of time travel, kind of matching up, as you see, with what Dr. Dan Burisch is saying. So this is great. I pointed this out in my previous video. What we saw on X was a drop of an interview with a person that essentially verifies Dan Burisch's position and story as far as his level of clearance and his involvement with folks at that level in Area 51, the infamous Majestic 12, MJ 12, Maja 12, whatever you call them, that somehow got leaked. Burisch confirms that this is real and that he was actively involved with these folks throughout his tenure working on these projects until they were able to deter the disaster in 2012. Let's take a look at this video that I don't think it just came out, but has kind of resurfaced, confirming the Dan Burisch claims that he was on essentially a lockdown and that he had this clearance to help this person get out of the country.
In fact, it was around this time that I was being followed to work, being followed to the bank, followed to the grocery store by this driver of the void van. This is very disturbing. By that time, we were receiving information, classified information, from government operations connected with the scientist Dan Burisch. After a while, we got a little paranoid because the information indicated that something big was coming down the pike. I started receiving letters, emails, and a videotape of this Dr. Burisch. And it clearly indicated that this scientist was in lockdown mode, and that his jailers and bodyguards were not allowing him to communicate with the public. He has been working on bioweapons and biowarfare projects, and he had been working with an alien. Eventually, we decided that we couldn't put up with this anymore. Coupled with the information that I was receiving that there was this big event coming down the pike in early 2003, we decided that we would leave the country. We would move to Canada. We found a property up there. I went up and took a look at it. Everything checked out, talked with the lawyers, met with the bankers, came back to Washington, and we made our plan to leave. We put our house up for sale, made the arrangements. I contacted the embassy. I asked them what we needed to cross the border. They said, just bring your paperwork showing that you're purchasing a property. I said, thank you very much. We were allowed to stay in Canada as refugees pending the outcome of a judicial hearing. When we finally got to the judicial hearing, the Immigration and Refugee Board member presiding, in effect the judge of that proceeding, told us that if we were able to prove the existence of Majestic 12, and consequently the projects that Dr. Burisch was working on, they would allow us to stay in Canada. Fortunately, this operations director was able to negotiate with us on behalf of Majestic 12, and between us, we hammered out what became known as the affidavit. The affidavit, as attested to by Dr. Burisch and provided to me, for use by the Canadian authorities in determining the legitimacy of our claim, admits that the U.S. government, through the agency of Majestic 12 and its control of all other federal agencies, does conduct surveillance on American citizens. It does harass American citizens, citizens that receive classified information that, if known to the general public, would produce panic. It does admit to the fact that Dr. Burisch has taken part in many projects that, if known to the general public, would produce panic in the general population. It does admit that Dr. Burisch had worked with an extraterrestrial from the Zeta Reticuli star system known as a JRod. And it does attest to the fact that individuals such as Dr. Burisch, who, if caught providing information to average U.S. citizens such as myself and my family, could be killed, terminated, with extreme prejudice.
Pretty shocking stuff, if that's legit. I know the lip to mouth syncing was a little bit off. I think that's because, like, it's a copy of a copy of a copy. The quality isn't very good, but the testimony is real and it's pretty interesting. So you tell me what you think. Let's continue on here with Michael Masters and Dr. Dan Burisch.
I've long thought that this move toward disclosure is not the government doing it, but the visitors themselves. Well, who are they working for? Why are they doing this? I don't know.
There's been exchanges going on for since they spoke with us in 41. They wish to find a resolution to the broken resonance between they and the other half of they, the so-called Orions and the Reticulans. They also wish to, for fear of extinction, have a relief of the paraprotein-related problem. But the exchange process is to solve the problem to prevent what went wrong in 2012. Rogue, if you will, group of the JRods are not cooperating with that. But a deal has been brokered for the T9 treaty to be held in abeyance until 2005. Once that's upped, they are supposed to come under the auspices of the general agreement between the Committee of the Majority and their respective societies. If so, nothing will get turned on aside from what nature and God is providing us in 2012, and we won't separate.
And I do think when people talk about seeing very modern humans in very modern military uniforms, that it is us, and it probably has been us for a while. If we're reverse engineering these things, if we're in contact with the people creating them, hypothetically if they are from our future, then yeah, it really makes you wonder what the level of interaction is. And then when you have experiencers who are also describing seeing these people in the same types of uniform we see military members walking in now, you got to wonder if people are working with them.
He crashed in '63, from what I understand.
What was that, right?
Outside of Kingman.
Okay.
Kingman, Arizona.
Right.
There was a problem involving his physiology and his biophysiological communication with the craft went wrong. And of course, he's ill, as we know, with the MGUS and the paraprotein associated problems. And he crashed.
Was he transported immediately from that crash site to the S4 facility? And how is
That I don't know.
Okay.
That I don't know.
You don't know how he came to be at the facility?
I believe he and associates were transferred separately. He to the originally to the Groom Lake facility, and an associate to, I believe, Los Alamos.
I do get the sense that we're sort of being led, we as in Congress in the United States, is being led to do something ahead of something that is coming. Historically, it was guiding away from. Now, even if they are meant to be disseminating information, I think it's less disinformation and misinformation, which was what they were doing over the last 70 years. And now it's probably just information. And I think it's less of a push and more of a pull from the visitors themselves.
They are aware that our emotions affect our state, our physical state, that our orientation to the energies which are available from the cosmos, if you will, affect the state of our DNA, affect the state of our health, and they are applying that as an experimental protocol, a rubric, if you will, to change the state of the people on board so that they can sample them for biological material, trying to ameliorate their own neuropathology, which is already starting and is becoming an issue within their populace at their timeline concerning reproduction. Reality could be mixed, which is why there are so many confusing data sets involving everything from fossil finds to strata.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. I'm going to reference you to a website that one Brian Jackson built, the Burisch Archive. Now, you can go digging on your own. There's even some really old stuff on the Project Camelot website on Dan Burisch, Project Lotus, Project Looking Glass, and other projects that he was a part of, and even some uploaded diagrams. Some folks say that those were uploaded as a rough idea of what Burisch could remember while being there. It's up for debate whether Burisch uploaded those or not. One thing is clear: Dan Burisch, he also goes by Dan Crane, is not in it for the limelight. If you watch all those videos, I think the same summary you'll come to is that he felt a duty to get this information out there, and then he felt a duty to get back to his work of trying to fix this whole debacle. You had future humans go back. Some of them went a little too far back because they wanted to use that technology and act like gods, maybe perhaps altering our timeline. This is what's really cool, is that Brian Jackson has this really awesome kind of layout of the doctrine of the convergent timeline paradox, which is something you'll hear Dan refer to quite a bit. I'm going to put the visual up here, and you can see you had the evolution of man. What happens is we hit this huge catastrophe and man breaks off. Okay, some of us go into the stars, like I was saying earlier. Some of us go into Earth underground, at least whoever survives this catastrophe. The folks that go into space eventually move on to Mars and move on to the Orion constellation, and in that evolution become essentially what we know as the tall Orions. The folks that go underground become the Zeta Reticuli, also known as the JRods. Both species are humans, but they're both breakaway species because of this terrible event. And when he talks about bringing the broken resonance back together, he's talking about essentially reassembling these two breakaway species of man and bringing us back together. And apparently what he was able to pull off with the Looking Glass device helped us to avoid this huge disaster in 2012. However, split our timelines up. And that's why time seems so strange now. And that's why sometimes you feel like you may have been bumped into an alternate reality, because maybe perhaps we were. That's the long and short of Dr. Dan Burisch. I hope you got something out of this, and I will catch you next time on our next broadcast. Thanks for watching The Gabriel Speaks Show.